The Buro Happald panel is going to discuss the future of AVs in consolidated urban networks, comparing, say, London to other much newer cities. Please welcome for this one, from Buro Happald, Margaret Teixeira, from Heatherwick Studio, Marco Mazzotta, and from University College London, Professor Bani Anvari, and this panel will be chaired by Federico Cassani from Buro Happald. Where am I now?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Federico Cassani. I'm a partner and the Global Director of Transport and Mobility at Buro Happald. And we wanted to share this plan and we wanted to talk about how autonomous vehicles will influence our future cities, either cities that exist, they are consolidated, or designing our future cities. In reality, when I was teaching at university, I was always fascinated about the way that mobility always informed, in a disruptive way, the urban design of the cities. From the ancient times, from the Roman Empire was based on the capacity of moving efficiently goods, armies, and they developed, the framework of the modern streets, the modern routes around Europe and even in England. And then, the disruption about the introduction of new technologies like, the metropolitan, the trains, in the 18th century has managed to, create the new metropolis, the expansion of the metropolitan life. And then, at the beginning of the 19th century, the cars became, at the beginning, they were like an incredible, sustainable and environmental friendly novelty in comparison to the horses and the chariots and the cows and the smog of the contemporary cities. Up until, in the, after the war, when the modernist movement started to defining the new urbanism related to the hierarchy of roads, to the highway systems, to speed which, changed the reality of our cities and really disrupted, in a way, the way that we designed our cities. In recent years, and in these years, we already had a very disruptive situation about mobility. First of all, the pandemic really dictated a new way of thinking about, the 15-minute cities, the neighborhood, the relationship between commuting and the working from home. But also, the city itself has already changed in relation to, in urban and mobility planning terms, the 50 years dichotomy between public transit and private transport, because of an eruption of different modes of transport, of a multiplication of choices that created a new form of mobility. Micro-mobility, for example, and mobility on demand system, car sharing, has already changed quite radically the way that we move around the city and the way that we perceive the relationship with the private cars and with the public transport. So, like, for example, we already invested quite an important time at Buro Happald to try to understand what is, if the design of our street is still contemporary. And we launched a few months ago a micro-mobility street design manual, because we think that we require to start rethinking about the way that we design our cities and the way that we design our streets. So what's next? So the next revolution, or the next disruptive, hopefully positive disruption, will be autonomous vehicles. And from this question, we wanted to have a very, I would say, in our experts, very different views. We have Professor Bani Amvari from UCL, which is our technology expert. We have Marco Mazzotta from Hedwig Studio, who is our designer architectural expert. And we have Margaret Teixeira, which is our new fantastic head of consulting, and also professor of UCL, which is an expert in socioeconomics. So we want to understand from different point of view if it's going to be a positive disruption. So, Bani, starting from you, what about, you know, your simulations, your testing, and what about the acceptance and the challenges of the autonomous vehicles?
Thank you very much. Do we start
Yeah, you
with
can.
some? Okay, great. Thank you. Maybe I start with. Maybe I start with a little bit of introduction on what we do and how we do it. So I am based at UCL, Center for Transport Studies, also at UCL Pearl, Pedestrian Environmental Activity Research Laboratory. This is a laboratory led by Professor Nick Tyler. It's 50 million investment of the government and UCL, and it aims at creating environments, real-sized environments in under controlled conditions to explore how humans interact with the environment. In this laboratory, we can control and manipulate the ground, the lighting, the sound system, and the smell, and look into how we can design our cities so that they are designed for cities and they are going to make our life or contribute to our health and our sustainable city environment, and it is inclusive for all of us. Within this laboratory, I'm leading the Intelligent Mobility Lab, where we have a car simulator and where we are looking into human-machine interactions under different conditions. To give you some examples of some of the things that we are looking into, we are looking into getting ideas about how humans are making decisions under different conditions when it comes to driving an autonomous vehicle or generally driving a car. So we look into how human brain works, which parts of the brain are making decisions in different conditions, how they relate to the condition where they are making a decision, and while a human is driving, how do they observe the environment before making a decision. So we put EEG caps, as you can see in this video, and eye tracking systems on people, on drivers, and explore how the whole combination of human brain signals and monitoring of the environment works in different conditions, especially when it comes to the handover task. Another thing we look into is different types of feedback that we can provide to the driver when it comes to indicating handing back control or giving control. You all know visual audio feedback exists in existing commercial vehicles. So what we look into is looking into having haptic feedback in the driver's seat. So we have embedded a number of robotic structures in the driver's seat, on the side and at the back. And these robotic structures will get stiff when we want to indicate to the driver that you need to take back control. So it becomes stiff and it comes closer to your body, indicating that you are in control. And when we want to indicate to them that you can give back control to the driver, they all become soft and nice, and indicating that you can let the vehicle to drive by itself. So we look into what is the best combination of different types of feedback in order to send different messages to the driver. And from the visits that we have had from different companies and different parties, such as Motability, it was highlighted to us that this type of feedback actually can be very beneficial when it comes to, for instance, people with hearing, when you have drivers with hearing impaired drivers, because they will not be, of course, have the benefit of receiving information through the hearing system. And also the third one, which is probably relevant to all the discussions we have had today, is that I'm leading the European projects where we are running 4 pilots of autonomous shuttles in different cities, Rikani, Happald, Helmand, and Konsberg, where we are looking into taking the safety driver out of the autonomous shuttles and operating multiple autonomous shuttles and logistics services remotely from the control room. From the UCL side, we look into the user acceptance and safety using questionnaires as well as interviews with the public, as well, and we also look into the workload of the person in the control room to indicate where are the limits, how many autonomous shuttles and logistics services can be actually delegate to the person in the control room, and which tasks actually we need to monitor and which tasks do we need to rely on the on the person in the control room for operating. This is just to give you a quick overview of some of the projects that we are working on, and with this introduction I would like to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Pani. So, Marco, Hedderwick Studio is famous for both design, cities, of buildings, of architecture, but also automotive design with the Roadmaster. We all know the new double-decker in London, and some concept cars, Airo, for example. So, what, in your view, is how autonomous vehicles can change, the way that we design our cities, the way we design our streets, and also how the vehicles themselves can start becoming something different in terms of design.
Thanks, Federico, and hi, everyone. Yeah, as you mentioned, we are quite lucky to expand our portfolio. We've been very, very lucky to design. It's not very typical. I will reframe it, actually. We are not really an architectural office. We're more like a design office, and we've been lucky enough to design small products such as perfume bottles till airport and big buildings, of course, and as well as buses, as you just mentioned, and cars. And I guess for me as an architect, I'm extremely fascinated in the city itself and understanding how the city has evolved in the past and how it will evolve in the future. And I think specifically how the infrastructure itself will either disrupt, as you mentioned before, and hopefully will be an optimal disruption for the city itself. And I guess the questions that I have is really in relation to autonomous vehicle. It's really understanding the relationship that the autonomous vehicle will have with the city itself, and whether we see those as a system which is going to be added to the existing infrastructure, or whether it's something that is going to replace what's currently there. And I think with that in mind, I think it's worth jumping back in the past. You mentioned before how a bit of a very brief summary of the history of mobility, but I'm very interested into see how in the past the change of mobility has led to something extremely positive within the city. And so when we think about even the Thames, which is just here in front of us, the Thames wasn't the space that we know now, where it's this beautiful public space where we walk on a Sunday and with our family and friends, but it was a port, essentially, right? And so it was one of the main infrastructure pieces for the city. And of course, with the event with the railways, and the kind of like the system became kind of redundant. And that led to questioning, what do we use this space for? And I think there's huge potential here as well, with really just thinking how the autonomous vehicle will impact that. And of course, there is a lot to say about how do we use the vehicle itself, whether it's something which we see more as a private, or whether we see as part of a bigger public and share system. I think the hope from our side is that hopefully we'll reduce the amount of vehicles around, but at the same time we'll still give a lot of choices to people to move around from from A to B in the most comfortable and fast way, which then can lead again into really question what do we use our infrastructure for, especially the streets. Is that an opportunity to rewild some of the streets that we currently have? And we really just trying to, London is one of the biggest green cities in the world. Can we push that to an extreme? I think that would be fascinating. But of course, green is one thing, but as well as the use of the spaces could be multiple of way of using. Can enhance the high street, or it can enhance just the public spaces around us. So I think that's extremely fascinating, and I really look forward for the moment to happen. And I guess the other point, which is extremely important, which is at the core of whether it's a street or whether it's the vehicle, is us as a human being. How do we experience those spaces, whether it's a street or the car itself? And one of the big questions that we had as a studio when we work on autonomous vehicle for IM Motors, which was launched last year at the Shanghai Motor Show in 2021, was really just to rethink what do we use the space for once we're not driving anymore. And to me, it's just like you can imagine, all of you probably been in the underground, in the tube every morning, and you see how people on long commute use a space in a very different way, right? There's people that read the news, people that keep working, people that do makeup, but all of a sudden that dimension can be seen as something completely private. So what do we use the space for? We are not driving anymore. So whether it's a 10 minutes drive, whether it's an hour drive, there's a lot of multiple opportunities. I check if I have, yeah, great. I have a slide of the car. So this is a concept design that we launched in 2021, and it's going to be in production by 2024. And I think just to give you a bit of an insight of the thinking behind this is that we didn't want to design the car from the outside in, but we really just start questioning what do we do once we are into that space. And so we carefully look at and question really what are the main functions, what does the space become? And we saw this almost like as an extension of the living room. It's what we call a movable room in a way within the city. And I think that the started by really just creating a centerpiece, which was a table, which can be retractable. And just all around the table, we started designing this like 4 seats. So the configuration of the space within the car suddenly changes completely to what we're used to see. It's not the classic car where you're all driving, just looking to the front, but all of a sudden you can turn completely your seats, and that becomes really a space where you can play with your friends. And I guess the question for me as well is, this starts raising a lot of questions about not only what do you do when you're driving, but also what do you do when you park the car? Does this become an opportunity for the vehicle to become much more than a vehicle in a way? So that hopefully gave you a sense of what is that we do, and I really welcome any comments later on in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Marco. It was very, very interesting. But I think I'm going to go back to one of the previous panels when there was, they were talking about, do we really need autonomous vehicles and why do we need it? And I think, from Margaret, I would like to understand, from a socio-economic point of view, really, the important thing from my point of view is that we need to make these systems important for the users, and important for users that cannot, at the moment, have access to mobility. So weak users, people who can't drive, and the other point is affordability. We don't want these systems to become an elitarian system, but needs to be, needs to support the existing, as TfL was saying before, the existing systems and integrate them. So, Margaret, is the autonomous future positive?
I haven't got any slides, thanks. So for me, I think there's always the cost and the benefit coming from an economics background. I've spent my entire career looking at city interventions of different scales. So setting out the original case for the Elizabeth line, why do we need this east-west connectivity? Who's actually going to benefit from this investment? And my challenge with autonomous vehicles is that it still, to me, is quite a long way away. Is it going to be that we've got quite a long introductory period for when they're working alongside existing types of vehicles, existing systems? Because the real benefits actually, to me, seem to arrive when we've got the system fully automated. That's when you get the benefits of having a really efficient use of the road space. It's when you get the benefits of having a safer system. And it's when you get the benefits of kind of increasing the mobility options for everybody. And I can't fathom out when that's going to be. Is it going to be in like 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? So I'd quite like people in the audience to come back with some views on that when we come to the question time. But there are going to be absolute winners within this. So I worry at the moment that it's going to be a rich person's toy. Is that, we've got electric cars that are coming in, but if you look at who's buying them, it does tend to be the wealthier. When is it going to, with autonomous vehicles, the knack will be to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. We've got an ageing population across the world, and a lot of those ageing people have got increasing disabilities. So will autonomous vehicles be the kind of future for mobility for that kind of demographic, where we can provide them an opportunity to leave their home and go to wherever they want to? And I think it's particularly important for those who are used to be drivers, but get to an age where they're no longer safe or able to do so. Having an autonomous vehicle for them is a continuation of their freedom. So I think that's quite an exciting group and an exciting opportunity for people to think about. From an economics point of view as well, it's the kind of use of space that Marco was talking about. If we've got this system that's working much better and much more effectively, so we've got we've got less stress in society because your car journey is hopefully in an autonomous vehicle going to be smoother, more predictable. You're not driving, so you might get less angry with other people's driving, or always other people's driving that makes you angry. So there's kind of, for me, there's quite a lot of potential health benefits of this as well. You've got that kind of calming of the road network. How is it that an autonomous vehicle is going to support that? But also you've got this time that we were talking about. If you're no longer spending your time focusing on the driving, what other things can you be doing? What's the kind of productive times that you could be doing? You could be responding to emails, which many people do on a kind of train system into work. Or you could be learning a new skill because you've got this beautiful table in front of you. You could have a tutor in there with you, couldn't you, for an hour, teaching you a new language or something. Or it could be that you kind of, the other thing is also, is it going to be a shared system or is it going to be private? Because I'm particularly worried about these private vehicles and the impact on loneliness in society. If you start to transfer your kind of movements from public transport where you can engage with others and you just kind of hop into this vehicle and it's just you get to where you need to go. I just think it's a kind of quite sad in many ways that we're going to lose that kind of societal connection. I've got some other things as well. So if we open up space across our cities, there is a potential to make our cities more equitable. Car ownership isn't even across society. So if you're in the bottom 10% of income for households, about a third of those will own a vehicle. If you're in the top 70%, it's more than 90%. So we already have this kind of inequity of access to space. And I think for me, we need to kind of really be careful about how we envisage these vehicles. So will it be that TfL just runs a whole fleet of autonomous vehicles or shuttles, and that you're just replacing some drivers' jobs with a new way of working? So there's quite a lot as well around the kind of wider economy about which spaces it opens up. So we know that when you invest in heavy transport systems or even put a bus stop into some locations, it will make that area more attractive for real estate investment. With autonomous vehicles, will it be that it's a kind of the way to rejuvenate some of our smaller towns and improve the kind of connectivity via the road network? That could, because you've got the fleet of autonomous vehicles working more efficiently. And we wouldn't have to be spending the kind of very costly amounts on heavy infrastructure going forward and heavy transport infrastructure. I think that's quite a lot of questions I'm probably asking you and some initial thoughts. So I'll go back to Federico.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I think we still have 3 minutes, and so I would open for questions from the audience.
Hi, panel. Thank you for your very interesting analysis. My name is George. I'm the co-founder and managing director of UB POS UK Limited. So, question to all the panel: as you just discussed, we're seeing more kind of that kind of delivery robots or the kind of e-mobilities coming to our smaller cities. As we want to get more areas outside London. London's great, of course, but more areas engaged. For example, in Milton Keynes, we have the kind of Starship delivery robots, quite nice and doing a great job. Do you envisage more of that kind of, service, kind of post COVID recovery kind of stage now we're in, especially for elderly, vulnerable people, to give them kind of more mobility, equality mobility, and also get them to be able to that kind of explore more of the world outside through this kind of services. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to start that.
Yeah.
There's something that I think this is a very interesting point, and for me, that's something that when we think about autonomous vehicles, we always associate with the car. But I'm really interested into understanding what other autonomous vehicles do we have. Can the bike be autonomous? Can your rollerblade be autonomous? Your skateboard, and any other, the scooters. And I guess it's really just about giving a lot of choices in a way, and alternatives, because it's always is the bus, is the car. I think there's a lot more other opportunities there, and maybe even just for disabled people, is that an autonomous vehicle for them as well? There is a lot of opportunities out there. I think we should definitely explore those. Totally.
Yes, I agree with what you just said. So these people, they also have the right to live like the rest of us, as that kind of, which I don't want to use the word able-bodied people, to enjoy life and also to contribute and to receive from society. So I think offering them that kind of mobility or improved mobility will drastically help them. And also they are also, don't forget, a force of economy. They also have their spending power, and we are actually boosting the not country and internationally, the whole kind of world's spending power and GDP by involving those people who otherwise could have been excluded before, or that kind of drastically excluded from the full kind of services that they can enjoy and explore. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I totally agree in the sense that I see the future of mobility as not really as a we were talking before about the dichotomy of the systems, public transport against private. And now there is the third sharing or shared systems. I think the future of mobility is not about, what type, the typology, the technology, but is a user-centric relationship. So if we are able to multiply the choices for the users, for all type of users, specifically for the one that have, that are mobility impaired in relation to, physical or social problems, we are going to have a better mobility in the future. So I think is an overarching principle that we need to design our cities, that we need to design our mobility systems tailored for the people that require mobility. And there are very different systems that we need to think about, very different conditions. London is very different from many other cities. London is very different from the countryside. Countryside requires different type of solutions. We cannot expect to have the same solution in the metropolis. We cannot expect to have the same solution in low density areas. And so I think the technology is required to help this leap forward in relation to a more equitable mobility system.
If I may add to that, as you said, it's quite important to start from the people and look into it from a human-centric vision. Actually, when you mentioned introduction of autonomy and autonomous vehicles, as you said, it's not about introducing this technology, but it's actually which gaps are they able to fill in. For instance, that can be for integration of these systems, or within our system, there are like some last mile or last part of the trip that they can actually play a very key role to connect different parts of our city, inside or outside the city, but also they can help us achieve our air pollution targets. So by introduction of, for instance, these electric shuttles, we can enforce our targets and also then contribute towards a more healthier city which is in line with the targets of also City of London. And another thing is that starting from the people, sometimes these autonomous vehicles are filling a gap that we might not necessarily think about. For instance, there are gaps such as in nurseries. It's a very, very specific example, but examples that doesn't come to people's minds. We noticed that when the carers are taking the kids to the parks or green environments around the nurseries, they tend to forget one or two elements or the food items or something on the way. And a lot of times some of them tend to go back to bring what they have missed. And you know how it's very important to not leave the kids unattended. In these cases, for instance, introduction of autonomous logistics services was very beneficial for them because they could go back without basically losing a carer in the park looking after the kids. The autonomous vehicle could go back and bring whatever was missing and come again. And you know, they are very rare, small cases, but they can provide a lot of benefits to our society. And it's quite important to start from talking to people, identifying where these autonomous systems can produce or can provide a benefit, and then by identifying these rare cases, then we also dedicate some of our investment and some of our focus towards these cases, not the normal, the usual that everyone is actually talking about, especially on highways or in cities, from getting to A to B. Just to add to that.
So, thank you very much. I would like to thank the panel. We could discuss, for another 2 hours probably, but I thank the panel, the experts, and the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.